Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here. My name is Clive Knights. I'm a professor of architecture at Portland State University School of Architecture. I was the founding director there, a director for 12 years. I stepped down in 2019 to pursue a career in art practice. I'm a collage maker and a printmaker. And if you'd like to see my work, I have a show opening in Rome, Italy, next Friday. See you there. I'll be asking the questions and trying to stay out of the way as much as possible to these two interesting guys who I'll introduce to you right now. Jeff Kovel, founder and design director at Skylab Architecture, a consistently award-winning Portland-based practice, now pushing 25 years nearly, next year, I guess, if I'm right in my calculation. 25 years in existence and continuing to make, I would say, some of the more compelling work in this city and region. And on the other chair, Mark Smith, an artist and musician who recently retired as VP of Special Projects at Nike Innovation, a career spanning 30 years, including graphics, sneaker design for several of the nation's top sports people. He's also a board member and an instructor, here at the Bodecker Foundation. So Mark, I'm going to start with you and ask you if you could tell us a little bit more about your role here at the Bodecker and about your creative endeavors currently.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for coming down. Appreciate everybody's. And I'm going to be serious. There's a lot of seating over here and a lot of people back there that probably can't see. And it's a flexible space, and this place is about being flexible. So feel free to move on down and join us in the ring, the circle of fear right here. That's it. That's all I do here. I move people around. I knew Sandy for many, many years, personally, professionally. And just was exposed to the brainchild of this guy in bringing this to life. And as an instructor and a mentor in creative, was building the future of creativity with the next generation of kids. This is a great and wonderful space. So as a board member, I step back and don't make any decisions. And as an instructor, I try and mold those kids as malleably as possible into all sorts of creative trouble and fun. That's it, I think. And I'm a seat warmer.
Could you say a little bit about your own creative work currently?
My own creative stuff is through any discipline that I'm generally not an expert in. So if I love to experience stuff that I have no right saying that I'm doing. So that's generally a theme of exploration, creative exploration. Currently, a lot of graphics and packaging is kind of the day job-ish type of thing that I've been doing. But painting and sculpting and performing and producing music and video and whatever else. Somebody says, hey, I wonder if we could do that. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I've never done it before, so it's good fun.
Thanks, Mark. And Jeff, could you tell us a little bit about Skylab, the practice?
Sure. Whoa, hey. Thanks. First of all, thanks to you both for being here. Both great friends, and I really appreciate you diving in and trying to sort this out, because we needed that. So my name's Jeff Kovel. I grew up in the East Coast in New York and went to architecture school at Cornell, and knew I wanted to be on the West Coast, and so kind of quickly migrated west via Colorado. Wasn't finding the architecture scene compelling there, and moved to Portland in 1996, which was a really cool time in Portland. Like the Pearl District hadn't really been more than maybe one building at that moment. And I got a job at the north end of the Pearl District. You had to walk 20 blocks to get to sort of near where the brewery blocks are now to find the one cafe that was open. And did that a lot. It smelled really bad, and got to get to Portland at a time when the city really, started taking off. And after a couple of years of work, at that time, actually, I ended up going to Miami and building a music studio for Lenny Kravitz and a house for him, which is, I only say that because it's kind of relevant to this project. I returned from that and felt like I was ready at the ripe age of 26 to start my own business, and in a city that I had no real connections to. And so I set out on my own and started Skylab, and through a series of sort of entrepreneurial projects and snowballing kind of relationships, and really just a willingness to take anything on, whether it was someone's closet or bathroom or house or office or whatnot. Kind of grew Skylab from one person to, I think we're around 30 today. Our work it really starts with sort of master planning, and what I'm really most interested in is sort of the intersection of nature and man, and sort of how we could be more collaborative, I guess, in sort of navigating that balance and resetting that balance in the future. But having the opportunity to sort of get in and really look at big picture relationships, and then be able to create a narrative and carry it down through not only the building, but or the landscape to the building, but then to like the interior spaces, and even to the integrated like narrative and storytelling within the space.
Great, thank you. Before we get into specifics, specific questions about this space and the foundation, I wonder if maybe Mark, you could say a little bit about Sandy Bodecker, and Jeff, maybe you could follow up and just give a brief description of the program of this building, so that everyone has a sense of really what the nature of the spaces we are in before we get into.
Sandy's one of the great innovative thinkers around, and especially in the Northwest. He came from an athletic background as a skier, Olympic level skier, who had a very busy and active life, not only in athletics, but also in creating a culture in sneakers through Nike. Was one of the people I met when I first started in 1989. We just bonded a friendship through music. He loved to play the blues. He was a harmonica and bass player. We connected through music. He had recording studios and was an avid art collector as well. So many of my friends were, up on the wall as well. And so I got to really connect with him creatively through that. Understood him to be just a free thinker and just a wild guy. I mean, we just connected on that. I don't remember the first day we met. It just felt like I always knew him, and that's one of those like special, creative, personal love relationships that I just remember fondly. That translated very clearly at Nike, where back in the day it was a pretty free-spirited company, a little different than in the movie recently, and that's okay. Go see it anyway. Have a good time. But seeing him in the hallway, we would immediately get into a conversation about something, whether it was work or music or personal or art. These conversations would just gel naturally, and he had the ability to think laterally across many. I would just say a spectrum of creativity as well as business. An extremely incredible business guy. So finding that kind of mix, very unique, and I was just fortunate to be a part of his circle and finding this place many years later. Pretty incredible experience for me.
So Skylab, we started doing some Nike projects pretty early on, and I think just being one of the really interesting things about Portland, I think there's this great family tree poster somewhere where it shows all of the companies that sort of have branched off of Nike and their sort of center of gravity here. We are definitely on that tree, and through a series of residential projects, early creative projects, we did the first Nike project was in Elizabeth Street in New York. It was a laser exhibit that Mark actually had quite a bit to do with.
You have a better memory than I do.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And that project sort of grew into some other projects. We were just reminiscing about a space we did for the NBA All-Star Game where Mark and I maybe connected for the first time on a walkthrough. But anyway, through a series of those projects, we have built a foundation of relationships at Nike, and in 2013, actually I was looking at this morning, October 15th, 2013, I got an email from Sandy saying, yeah, I think we've met, you might not remember me, very humble kind of thing, but I have this idea to build this creative retreat. I don't know what to call it. I don't know where to build it. I think I could be in Hawaii or Bend or, probably somewhere remote. I would consider an urban project if the perfect space came up. And so we started this dialogue, and actually it was odd, but like I had just been to this building because I always loved this building. It was like mostly because of that concrete textured facade. But a sign went up for it to be for sale. And
It was an ink
It was
in a chocolate
ink
factory
and
or
chocolate,
something?
yeah.
Sounds like a movie.
Some of its many, yeah, totally. Some of its many uses.
Or a horror movie, but
But this thing should have been torn down and turned into, maybe a great housing project. Probably not. Probably a mediocre one. On 2 weeks later, basically, I told Sandy about this project or this potential real estate transaction. A week after that, he had it under contract. So like within 3 weeks from the first email to going to contract, which I was just like, I remembered that, but I was just kind of floored looking at that again this morning, just thinking about how you tackle something this big and how you turn your life kind of on a dime like that and be so decisive. Is really fascinating.
I think that was one of his qualities that we counted on, and everybody counted on at Nike, was the ability to make a decision and go forward with it immediately. I think that was one of the strengths that we got to.
With conviction, yeah. And so, the Sandy's vision was very open-ended, and he really put a lot. He opened up a zone basically, and really gave us the creative freedom to kind of to interpret his sort of vague direction and pursue it based on our own kind of process. We probably keep talking about, but that's sort of the genesis of this project.
So briefly, what are the spaces that are programmed into this building, just to get a sense?
So the building consists of obviously this event and sort of gathering space, the skate bowl back here, the music studio, which is around the corner. This ground floor is a sort of creative arts studio / kitchen. There's the Blue Room, which is really was intended to be a place where we could do offsites and sort of gather creatives to ideate, and then the outdoor kind of garden spaces, which are intended to both be useful for art making and also for gathering and kind of communing, I guess you could say.
Communing is good, yeah.
Yeah, and then upstairs there's two residences. One was designed originally as Sandy's space, and then the other as a sort of artist in residence. We sort of knew that while we were going through this place was designed to live for a long time, so that Sandy's space would also turn into another residence potentially down the road. And then there's offices, and there's a gallery up there that has a really incredible collection of Sandy's objects. There used to be his bass collection, which was totally amazing. He had, I don't know, hundreds of basses, but I think he had 30 or 40 of them in the building, and some of them were the first prototypes for electric Fender basses ever made. And then on the roof, there's a bunk room, so your band can sort of shack up on the top like you would in a tour bus.
Shack.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's a roof deck that includes a kind of a campground and a slide.
Best view in the city.
Yeah,
All
and
mountains.
a great lookout. Yeah.
What an incredible opportunity to bring all those things together. And then from an inspiration standpoint, his father, an illustrator and poet and writer, the blue in here. So you'll see a lot of references back to his father and his kind of where he came from. Didn't want to forget that. And just how it all came together. I think it was pretty magical in seeing all these things come together as an homage to the Pops.
Thank you. Before we get into more specific conversation about the building itself, I'd like to get both of your thoughts on the kind of cultural value of creative play. We seem to live in a world where we're encouraged to be kind of rational and purposeful and have self-control and be calculative. Our pedagogy of our schools tends to not really push creative play, maybe perhaps as far as we might all believe it should be. So why do we need a place for creative play? Sandy Bodecker said he wanted a place in which to rediscover, quote, the unlimited curiosity you had when you were a child, which is not perhaps something you might think about promoting as an adult. He seems to be acknowledging in that statement, I think, a loss of capacity and reverence for meaningful play in our contemporary lives. So what is that, in your opinions? And why do we need a space to encourage it?
We kind of took it out of a lot of schools. I'll just jump right in and say that used to be school, my recollection back in the 1800s. The idea that you'd go to school, you get some physical exercise, you get some art, you get some science and math and history and all sorts of stuff, and you go out and tussle and kind of be physical. That stuff is gone. This is a great place where you can go skate around the neighborhood, go get some coffee, whatever, wander around. There's a park. There's a place right there where you can make prints, T-shirts, business cards, anything you want to promote your thing. Go in and record a studio album. Go upstairs, sleep. I mean, it's a place that embodies all of those things. And I'm curious about any other locations locally around that have that as a vision, not just as a byproduct of the finished piece, but as a vision, as a directive. And so I think that's what's unique about this place.
Yeah, and I think this place particularly is a playground, like, for creatives, essentially. I was thinking about this a bit over the last day, and I think there's this whole relationship, well, obviously, between like innovation and play and risk taking, right? And like one thing I was thinking about was the sort of sanctuary that is created here to take risks, and it's a really, like, one of the things that Sandy, I'm probably very different than Sandy in the sense that, like, everything I touch is like sort of obsessively and compulsively coordinated, and like Sandy, like, yeah, his, if you would have seen a picture of his apartment or his condominium, or even just go up to the gallery, like, it's just like, there's this like an explosion of things and color and objects, and like just it's incredible. And I think that kind of culture of that explosion, I guess, to me is like a really safe place to take risks and bring in objects and make things, and you're not worried about them being coordinated or ugly or it's a completely non-judgmental state of creativity that he.
I think you said it there, a safe place to, hurt yourself.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. You can hurt yourself right there. You can hurt yourself right there. Creatively hurt yourself, meaning stretching your boundaries, and a place where you can try it without this, issue of being judged by a panel or a grade or something like that. Now, that's back to your original question. Very important to instill in kids. Go out, play, try stuff with your friends and with others who are going to encourage that. I think that's important. The encouragement of safe hurting.
Yeah. Yeah, and sort of judge yourself based on your own progress, not on others, I think is a critical thing. But I was thinking a little bit also about how, well, like Mark, when I started working with Nike, one of the times I interacted with Mark, I remember I went to his office, his space, let's say, and it wasn't an office, at Nike in the kitchen, and we had met, and I think I was there to see Jay or Tinker or something, and you were sitting at your desk, and Mark's desk was like the back seat of I don't know what kind of vehicle was it?
A vehicle.
that he had sort of like built this like apparatus around, and it was amazing. Well ahead in the world of ergonomic office furnishings. But he was in this space, and there was, they had created this sort of sanctuary within Nike to play, essentially, right?
Exploring was highly encouraged, and that was part of the exploration.
Yeah, and I think I hadn't really thought too much about the connection of that and this space, but I think in a lot of ways this is probably inspired by that, a version of that, but is open to the broader community, and that was kind of Sandy's gift, right? Is to sort of open that up to outside of the corporate realm.
It was a personal extension of his creative profession. Let's put it that way. I think, yeah, there are definitely ties that you brought from that, but actually wider, not only sport, but really completely creative.
I mean, what that suggests is that you perhaps need to create a different kind of environment for the work of creative play. If creative play is work, as you were just describing Mark's space. So, which leads me to a question about this building. So beyond just programming the activities, which you described earlier, Jeff, how do you feel this building transcends mere programming in its architecture in order to kind of promote playfulness and kind of creative response to being in an environment for that activity?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when we took on this project, you know, we wanted to sort of physically manifest the spirit of that thinking in an architecture, and it was a really interesting process because we tried to approach the project differently than sort of a typical project for us. So we started by like making art, which was very different for us. So we actually started taking other artists' work, like famous paintings and whatnot, and cutting them up and collaging them and placing them in the footprint of the building. And then we started with this series, I think there's probably some up there, but this series of like juxtaposition, like collages, where we just like took environments that had nothing to do with each other and just slammed them together. And just to try to like create like almost a preview of like the spirit or the outcome, and less about like the actual like line of or shape of the walls and whatnot. And that was a really fun process. And part of that was, it felt like there was an opportunity to sort of break the rules, here in architecturally. And I think it started with the inspiration of Sandy sort of saying that he didn't know whether he wanted like this place to be at the beach or in the mountains or in the city. And so we were just kind of like, well, let's just do that all here. Like, let's just bring it all into the same environment. Wouldn't that be unusual?
So there's sand out there in a fire pit.
Yeah.
It's your beach.
Yeah. So there's literally, we built a beach there. And then like we wanted, so we saw this thing as like 4 quadrants, and we wanted to take, like the bamboo garden was actually a building. And so we were like, well, let's create an artifact out of that building. So we tore the roof off, but left the walls and the beams. This building, obviously so beautiful, like we wanted to kind of honor its beauty by sort of occupying it. But we essentially created this kind of star-shaped hole in the middle, and started by excavating, which was really interesting because like the act of removing was like as important as the act of creating, and this is kind of a theme that we're exploring in our work. But we created that star-shaped hole, and then the building is meant to kind of embody like a crinkled up piece of tracing paper, like a wadded up a piece of paper. And that came from the original name that Sandy wanted to call this place was Sin Bin. And it had a few names, but it started as Sin Bin. And
did a few 100,000 logos for Sin Bin. It was fun.
Yeah.
I still have the t-shirts. I should have worn it. I spaced.
Yeah, and Sin Bin, I didn't know this, but like it's got a couple different meanings. One is it's like the penalty box in a hockey rink, but another is that it's like the trash bin in a creative studio where like you can make hand create things and just nothing's precious, crinkle it up, throw it out, blah blah blah. So we wanted to sort of embody that in a form, and then have that form be something that as you moved around, you would be constantly juxtaposed against all these different environments, and that like contradiction would sort of help free you from convention and kind of from what your expectation might be.
I think too, with that, one of the central focuses and themes was also fun. The idea that in any of these, you're having fun, whether you're a musician in the studio, whether you're skating, like really that permeated. And then there's one photo of me standing here just looking at the space empty. It must have been right after he purchased it. And I'm, thinking about the space and going, gosh, I wonder what we could do. Maybe there'd be some fun stuff. Couldn't imagine what this guy was dreaming about. But I knew that it was going to turn into some place that would be fun and encourage fun. And I think that was, and then to your point too, the shaft of light going all the way up, and you should probably talk about that too, because I always saw that as like this, meditation up through to the sky and pulling all the energy down from the blue, and that blue permeating through. It's a unique aspect of this place, and I always look at it and go, yeah, that's pretty damn cool. Nobody else is doing that, so.
Yeah, both pulling the sky down, but also you up, right, and try to bring you up to the roof and kind of change your powers of 10, in terms of your perspective.
Like I said, all that.
Yeah.
And more. Well, I've got a question for you. When was the first time he either mentioned it, or when did that really like pop for you? What was the thought?
Gosh, I don't know. I think it was probably just really inherent. I mean, when I'm looking at any design problem, like what I'm usually trying to do is create a series, like choreograph an experience that has like both the smallest and most intimate spaces, but also the biggest, most kind of maximal outcome, right? And so here, like getting on the roof was that. It's like, this is a sanctuary and you can get lost in here, but you can also go up and see, a lot of the city from a really unique perspective. And so that was, I think, just inherently something
I remember
we were
seeing
seeking.
that the first time I saw you invited me over to the studio and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And I looked at the drawings. I was like, holy shit, there's no squares in here. It's great. There's not one 90 well, there is back there. But the idea
that was existing.
But then I saw this feature and I kept looking at it going, what is this thing? And then it became very clear to me that that's really, really cool. That's super cool. So.
Yeah, one of the themes that I've been thinking about leading up to this event, and this is kind of just through some other like interviews with musicians I've been listening to and whatnot, is just the whole idea like that for a creative to kind of achieve their true potential, right? It's like you want to, the best creativity happens when the artist is in this flow state, right? And they've just like, they're not thinking about what they're doing. They're sort of checked out, time suspends, and oftentimes you hear, like I was listening to an interview and the artist was saying that, they get on stage and like they come off and they just like, it's like the time is lost, like the time disappeared, like 3 hours just went by and they just like, what happened, and I think that this place is really intended to sort of to foster that kind of thing. Like you come here, you start working on your album, and you probably could disappear out of this building for a week and just get completely focused.
Yes.
Yeah, and not think about anything else, and sort of emerge having created this amazing thing. And
you're fortunate in any place or environment to have, if you can find a place to get into the flow state, if you can find one spot where you can do that, whether you're alone or with others, you're fortunate. This has hundreds, literally hundreds of places where you can sit and get into that zone, whether you're skating or in the studio, up on the roof, in the corner, any number, the bathroom. Sorry, but the idea that, because that door is really heavy, it's awesome.
A bathroom you can record in.
I'm sorry?
A bathroom you can play.
It is a bathroom you
in.
can record in, and someone just leave it at that. So
apart from the, as you talked about the light, the shaft of light, what other of those spaces that you just mentioned are your favorite, and maybe most explicitly capture the spirit of Sandy?
Personally, and I've spent a couple sessions in here. Tanya's been very patient with me. Brought a few friends in, and we recorded some music. The space there's a great story behind that. That was built first. I've never heard of a recording studio that's been, let's have a finished recording studio and then build an entire project around it while it's active and being recorded is like incredible. So that's number one. That's a unique space. But it embodies the idea that, yeah, you can do this. It shouldn't be appropriate to do that. But I felt that when I was in there because, yeah, the bases were here, and the idea of having a place where you can just turn off and focus. Great staff, great equipment, and a great space to do that. The roof is the second spot where I just kind of gel out and see all the mountains, whether it's raining or foggy or sunny like today. You just have an untethered view of reality. And then in the bottom of the scape, the pool, it's pretty incredible. The sound in there is very different. And we recorded drums and bass and stuff down there, and that's pretty insane. The conference room, the Blue Room, definitely a place where we've got a lot of Nike offsites where we just get creative, kind of break out of the mindset. And so those are a couple of spots. The little coffee nook, I've had some great conversations there where you just kind of lose, like you said, you just lose where you are and how you are and who you are and just become part of somebody else in the conversation. Very comfortable. So those are a couple of the spots for me.
I read somewhere that the term labyrinth was used maybe by Sandy in your conversations with him, Jeff, about creating the building, which I was intrigued by, since the labyrinth is kind of a symbol, a cultural symbol across time of the cosmos playing with humanity, and that relationship between kind of human intention and the orders of nature. So I wanted to ask you a question about how this building responds to the orders of nature, since I understand it's part of your, one of the principles of your practice is to engage the natural and the built environment in very explicit ways, creative ways. So how does nature play its part in the conversation, perhaps with the human in this space?
Yeah, sure. I don't know, I mean, one of the things I'm really interested in is like subtracting from things that humans have done badly to the world and carving back and sort of erasing. I think the whole act of erasing is like something that we need to do more of as a culture, particularly around like parking lots and cars and,
Some people.
people, yeah. Politicians, yeah. And so I think this project definitely gave us the opportunity to sort of be additive and subtractive in the same way. And so, for me, the subtractive part definitely was about creating the opportunity to bring in nature into the space. And I think I'm a big believer in the benefits of nature. And we were talking earlier in the studio about nature deficit disorder, which we feel like generally most people probably suffer from. And so the opportunity to bring nature into the creative space, whether that's just to be inspired by it, or it's to sort of create the ability to sort of immerse and then pause and reflect and sort of move back between those stages, I think is a really important part. Just anecdotally, we just finished the Serena Williams building at Nike, which is design studios for 3,000 people, and the whole building is really designed about creating the opportunity for those designers to integrate with nature in their practice. But so to me, it was a really important part of this project, and sort of what we did was sort of try to integrate it as much as we could wherever we could. So, in this space, well, this was actually used to be full of plants, maybe a failed experiment, no judgment.
You gotta try. You gotta try. That's the big thing.
Yeah, but you have the beach landscape. You've got the bamboo garden in the back. There's ivy growing up in the building. Every roof, as you move up, other than this one, is planted roof. So there's roof gardens. There's both like synthetic versions of nature. There's like astroturf up there for just more of the campsites. And then there's green spaces around. The most spaces in the building, you have a direct connection to outside, which is something that I just feel is a really important piece of making good architecture. And then there's a lot of sort of spaces where you're covered or you're outdoors, the wall moves away, you're indoors and you're outdoors, and really just trying to sort of remove that conventional distinction.
You talk about the Four Seasons, I think at some point about talking about this building. How do the seasons in your mind play into the organization of the building?
I think it was similarly like in this sort of like diagram of the star in the middle with the beach and the Japanese garden and the skate bowl. I think we also saw that as like a way to see the seasons, the cycles of nature kind of playing out and influencing the space. So I think it was pretty simple, but really just as a way where if you were connected to these spaces, you would be seeing them transform throughout the year, kind of with your engagement.
I see that. I see us in the cave here, and at the other end up there you have the mountain peak, and then all things in between. I mean, it's
right, and that's very intentional. I mean, because this is about this, right? This is about sharing and connecting and immersing with a group, and not being distracted.
So Mark, what are you're on the board of the foundation. What's the future of the foundation look like in terms of activities going forward?
We've been really pulling together community outreach, working with the schools to bring kids and give them access to to this incredible place, and encourage the play of creativity. So the opportunity to teach and mentor for me is very personally gratifying, especially after working in the consumer world for so long and learning about the power and energy of the next generation. And I think that's really important. My particular focus is putting together a scholarship fund, a creative scholarship fund called the Lundy Smith Creative Scholarship Fund. To help with continued education out beyond here. So a bridge from here to the future, and really the opportunity to bring in the next talent and help mold them. And like I said before, it's a great opportunity to try and help influence and creatively help them explore many different disciplines before you get too locked into one. And I think that's kind of my focus there.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to open up for questions in a moment, but before we do that, I'd like Jeff to talk about a new book that is coming out very shortly on the work of Skylab.
Yeah. So we've been working for the last really like almost 3 years, sadly. It's a very long project, but to sort of take the first 20 years of our work and kind of reflect on it and create something out of it that could be shared outward. And we essentially were inspired. One of the things we think a lot about in our architecture is or architecture in general is architecture's relationship to like choreography and to music and improvisation. And I think there's a really fun, deep. We could have a second panel discussion, I think, where we just talk about that alone. I know you'd be a good person to do that with, but. This essentially it's our double album, concept album, in book form. So inspired by.
Was it recorded here?
Led Zeppelin and yes, in part, yeah. Sandy would I think be proud of that format. As you start to explore the book, it's literally like a record format, and there's liner notes and fold outs, and the pages spin around, and it's really fun. And there's some essays that talk about the relationship between music and architecture, and it's a really interesting culmination of the first, hopefully the first chapter, and we'll see where Skylab goes from there.
Wow, I can't wait to hear it.
Me too. Thank you both very much for your responses.